So what is it? What is it that you want people to know? What side of the story? We can get to what the media claimed, but I think in situations like this where everything's been so confusing for everyone who's hearing these stories about J6, however we want to call it, what do you want people to know about your side of things?
Well, I would imagine that people are quite sick of hearing about it. It's been so overblown in the media, and all the talk of violence and everything was just way overblown. So obviously, the truth is coming out, and the event was not as it was represented in the news. Um, but what amazed me about this whole experience, the last 4 years of my life have been trying to keep my head above water, dealing with the ridiculous overreach of the government. The fact that they can do that in our country is astounding. The weaponization, the lawfare, that type of thing has been just unprecedented and extremely unjust. Sorry, unjust.
That's
And
okay.
it's filtered down, of course, into my career and the fact that right after it was announced that I was there through the FBI on Twitter, looking for me, who is this person? Identify him. We need the name of this person wanted in connection with violence at the Capitol and assault on a federal officer and all those strong words. People spoke up. Some of them, unfortunately, were people I knew, which did not sit well with me. Just basically ratting you out and that type of thing without having any actual evidence on, to believe that I have done any of these things that they were charging me with or were going to charge me with. They were more than happy to roll over, and the whole industry followed suit, and they blacklisted me, and I haven't worked since that day 4 years ago. And it's been very tough on my family, and a lot of J6ers have experienced the same thing and worse. I went through, the DOJ's version of a fair trial or a fair process, and it was not that at all. I ended up taking a plea agreement and was sentenced to a year and a day in prison. I was supposed to go into prison 2 days ago on the 6th of February. And, thank God for Trump. He stepped in there and issued the pardons, and that's huge. But I have to say the reaction of, well, the entertainment industry anyway, was way, I couldn't believe it. They completely blacklisted me. I got fired. My agent fired me. I got fired from my jobs. Bob's Burgers, they just shuttered up and wouldn't speak to me, and I was gone from there. They said they banned me from the offices like I was some kind of a terrorist, as the government was portraying J6 people. And it was really unfortunate because, of course, people would assume that the entertainment industry is left-leaning and liberal, but their reaction was a little too pat and a little too reactionary. They completely said, "Get them out of here," and that was it. So that was too bad.
Now, I want to talk about some of the stuff that I read, and people will now see this from a different lens. They probably didn't see it from that lens several years ago, especially coming from the main source, the first source that I read from, which was NBC News. And I had a problem. Now, of course, I wasn't there, only you were there. I did have a problem just reading it. Now, of course, I can look at things from hindsight at this point, but what they pointed to was 10 minutes in a lower tunnel, and then the claim was that you, the word they use is crush in quotations, which I'm guessing is the person's quote. What exactly were they describing, and how are they describing it and trying to make it worse? I'm assuming from your point of view, sound much worse than it actually was, because for 10 minutes to be the focal point of all this great harm that they said you did seems like a small and very precise amount from my perspective. So can you describe what they said you did versus what you feel actually happened, or what
Yeah,
actually did happen?
Yeah, it's interesting that it was characterized that way because I didn't experience it that way. Certainly, the the incident which they speak of was well. I have to say this: that after they dealt with everybody who went inside the Capitol, pointing to those people as being the worst of the group and the real, architects of the whole thing. They were looking for other villains to point to, and they went down to the back of the building, to the tunnel area, and claimed that that was the most violent of the entire riot that they were calling a riot. I was in there because I didn't feel threatened really to move closer to that area, and I saw people were getting hurt, kind of looked like they were getting their heads bashed in a bit by the police, and I went up there because I thought, well, I can take the place of a violent person and sort of dissipate a little bit some of this nonsense of this fighting, because there was no reason for it. It's not like there was any ground to be gained or any benefit from doing anything violent at this protest. So I went near that area, and then when I was up there, it was kind of dissipating a little bit, and then it started getting crowded again, and the crowd pushed in. And there were some agitators behind us that were yelling heave ho and pushing. And I would say like about half the people in that tunnel area were not interested in being there when that push came and wanted to get out. And people were screaming. I could hear a woman crying and yelling near me. I could also hear the officer about 4 feet away who was getting crushed on a door frame, his screams. And people were saying, stop, quit pushing, back up, they didn't want to be there. And there were agitators that were bent on some type of violent, interaction. They were throwing things, they were macing, from the other side as well. The police were macing, doing pepper spray, and all in this very confined area. Led to a lot of panic, and, there's shields were being passed around that were supposedly taken from the police, but there was also a report that there was a box of shields that was on the exterior of the tunnel that people were pulling police shields from. That I didn't personally witness, but it would make sense because there were a few of them around. So I ducked down at one point because the shield was passed over my head, and saw a taser wire and the spike zipped by my knee and just missing me. And that's when I realized I really, really have to get out of here. This is ridiculous. And I just went down low and sort of pushed at the knees and hips of people, because that was the only place I could push people, and was able to weasel my way out that way until I reached the top of the stairs and I was outside. So that was basically that situation. And when you are in a crush like that, you're off balance, or I was off balance the whole time, and I couldn't get right myself. I couldn't stand up. So my hands were on the person in front of me in order to push myself up, which of course on video looks like I'm pushing. So it was difficult to even suggest there was any other way to look at that. But I eventually had to escape from there.
Now, they mention in what they claim to be the story is they go out of their way. I think they probably had to mention that you were helping people. You were helping people that had been pepper sprayed, helping them wash out their eyes. Is there anything in what they claimed? Because people are going to say, Andrew's a biased interviewer. He doesn't believe it from the onset, whatever they want to say, the same way they would say something if somebody was being interviewed on The View or something. Is there anything, if you're being super generous, you can say that you felt you did wrong? Or is this a case, as I think many, many people are on the receiving end of, is the government wanting to make an example out of you and out of other people? Is there any room to be like, maybe there's something that I did wrong? And I'm not trying to coax you into saying that. I'm just saying, for the people who are going to say that, of course he's going to say that. Is there any feeling you have as a man where you're just like, I shouldn't have done any single thing in there?
Well, you're right. Of course, I am going to say that. And of course, they're going to say what they say as far as the government's concerned, because they had something working for them on their side in the realm of charging people with crimes. And that was that violence occurred and that they couldn't tell who did what or who started what, couldn't tell if somebody was a CHS, a confidential human source working for the FBI, whether they were an asset in any regard or an agent or something. You can't tell. So in that realm, yeah, they were able to say, I was in a violent riot. They were characterizing it as a riot. It was a civil disorder. Let's say legally, that's the term perhaps. So in that realm, there were charges that made other charges, like a misdemeanor charge that made in the presence of another misdemeanor, turned that misdemeanor into a felony. So in a civil disorder, when you are obstructing the police in doing their duty, it turns it into a felony, something along those lines. I'm not a legal expert, just was schooled in a few things during this experience. But the thing is that with my pouring water on people's faces to alleviate the burning of the pepper spray, they said I was aiding and abetting. So you have to then go, okay, well, that means you're aiding and abetting someone who did something wrong. So that's the problem with it, right? That's the crime. With that, I agreed. Yeah, okay, I was aiding and abetting because clearly I was helping them, and you're not supposed to help people that are doing bad things. So I didn't characterize it as them doing bad things at the time because it, to me, was not what they were characterizing it as later. So later on, when they charged me with that, I was like, well, that's kind of, I guess I can see that that's true. I was doing that. But the idea that they characterized the entire event as a riot, or civil disorder, it was at moments. And, they also took that group that was in the crush in the tunnel there, and they turned them into one entity and said, being an individual in that group, you are part of the group, which the group assaulted the officers. So therefore, you assaulted the officers. That's a bit of a stretch in my mind, but I guess legally they can do that. So those were the only two things that I felt were somewhat appropriate given the circumstances. Although when you examine it, the circumstances may have been, invented by, or not invented, but rather caused by people who are bad actors or illegitimate civilians.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, but first I want to say I wildly disagree with the first part because the idea and the precedent that I think has been set, even in NATO, is to help medically people who are, you're in a war with, and police will help criminals that have been injured even if they've shot them. So I think, in my non-legal opinion, federal courts, that I don't see how you can connect that when police are supposed to perform first aid on on a criminal if they've shot them. So I don't, ethically, I wildly disagree with that premise that has been set against you or anyone else for that matter.
It feels natural. It feels natural and appropriate to do. So I don't think that someone should stop themselves from doing that, certainly.
Yeah, and that's the standard I think that is set quite literally worldwide.
Turn it up, Jordan.